When a customer mistreats an employee, what happens next will shock everyone. But before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories like this one, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow, we have another special story just for you. In the busy chaos of a local market, John, a young worker with Down syndrome, struggled to stay calm. It was his first day on the job, and he wanted to do his best. But suddenly, the peace was broken. An angry customer began shouting cruel words at him, humiliating him in front of everyone. The worst part? No one stepped in to help. People just watched in silence. What no one knew was that among the shoppers, a famous Hollywood actor was paying close attention. And what he did next would leave everyone speechless. John, 21 years old, was known for his kindness and dedication. He had a bright energy that made people smile, but inside, he carried wounds that few could see. His stepfather, a cold and harsh man, had left deep scars on his heart. Memories of his childhood flashed in his mind, his stepfather's cruel voice echoing in the background. "You'll never amount to anything, boy. Don't even try." Even though those words hurt, John had decided long ago that he would not let them break him. He was stronger than anyone's insults. And today, his determination was his greatest strength. The market was small but full of life. Shelves were stacked neatly, and the sound of carts rolling across the floor filled the air. John walked in wearing his uniform proudly. Jack, the manager, greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome to the team, John. We're happy to have you." John eagerly shook his hand. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." His training started right away. He learned how to organize products and bag groceries. John listened carefully, making sure to remember every detail. Some of his co-workers noticed his enthusiasm, but others exchanged whispers. "He's a bit slow, isn't he?" One of them muttered, not realizing John could hear. John pretended not to notice. He just kept working, determined to prove himself. By the end of his shift, he was exhausted, but proud. As he finished bagging a customer's groceries, a long sigh came from the line. He didn't notice, but someone was watching him with growing impatience. The automatic doors slid open, and in walked Karen, a woman with sharp eyes and an air of superiority. Her heels clicked loudly as she marched through the store, already annoyed before she even got to the checkout. She sighed dramatically. "These stores never know how to organize things," she muttered, making sure people around her could hear. Karen rushed through the aisles, throwing items into her cart carelessly. If anyone got in her way, whether a child or another customer, she gave them an irritated glare and a loud scoff. Finally, she arrived at the checkout. The line wasn't long, but for someone as impatient as her, it felt unbearable. She tapped her foot, watching John bag groceries. His careful, precise movements made her roll her eyes. "Is this for real?" she muttered. "How can someone this slow be working here?" When it was finally her turn, Karen slammed her items onto the counter. John gave her a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am." She narrowed her eyes. "I hope it is good because I don't have all day." John carefully scanned her items and placed them into bags. But Karen kept staring at him, sighing loudly with every small movement. She tapped her fingers impatiently on the counter. "Is this going to take long?" she snapped. "Because honestly, it feels like I'm watching this in slow motion." John's face turned red. His hands started to tremble. He tried to move faster, but his nervousness made things worse. A package slipped from his hands and hit the floor. Karen scoffed. "Oh my God, he can't even hold a bag." Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. John quickly crouched down to pick up the fallen package, his breathing growing heavier. Karen crossed her arms. "Someone needs to do something about this," she said, raising her voice. "This is ridiculous. I don't have all day to deal with incompetence." A murmur spread through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. But no one spoke up. Karen stepped closer, pointing a finger at John. Her voice was sharp and filled with disdain. "This is unacceptable. You shouldn't be working here if you can't even handle bagging groceries. Who hired you?" Because clearly it was out of pity. John's hands shook as her words hit him like knives. He kept his head down, trying to focus. But then, Another bag slipped from his grasp, falling to the floor with a loud thud. Karen smirked. "Look at that!" She laughed sarcastically. "He can't even hold a bag. This is pathetic." John swallowed hard. His breathing was uneven. He needed to finish the transaction, but the pressure was crushing him. He looked across the store, searching for Jack, the manager. But Jack was busy. Karen's cruel words triggered a painful memory. He was a little boy again, sitting at the kitchen table. His stepfather loomed over him, shouting, "You'll never get anything right, boy. You're dead weight and everyone knows it." John squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push the memory away. But the pain felt just as real as it did back then. And then, something changed. In his memory, John hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself smaller. He wanted to disappear, but the harsh words always found him. Just like now, he felt the same tightness in his throat that he had as a child, sitting at the kitchen table while his stepfather's insults rained down on him. "I just want to help," he whispered to himself, barely loud enough to hear his own voice. Karen, noticing his discomfort, took another step closer. She jabbed a finger at him like she was scolding a child. "Someone needs to teach you how to do a real job. You're holding everyone up," she snapped. Her voice echoed through the store, turning heads. Customers in nearby aisles peeked over to see what was happening. Some in line murmured among themselves. A few seemed to silently agree with Karen, while others looked uneasy. Several people pulled out their phones, recording the scene. John opened his mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. His throat tightened, his chest ached, and tears burned behind his eyes. But he refused to let them fall. Just then, the sound of firm footsteps approached the checkout line. The usual hum of the market, the beeping of cash registers, the squeak of shopping carts, faded into silence. The air felt heavy. Everyone turned toward the source of the footsteps. Karen was still staring at John, her anger growing. She threw her arms up dramatically. "This is an insult to my time," she shouted. "I can't believe I have to deal with this." People in line kept their eyes down, pretending to be focused on their phones or the floor. No one dared to step in. At the back of the line, an older woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Isn't someone going to do something? That poor boy looks so lost." The man hesitated, glancing around. I don't know. We don't want to cause trouble, do we?" Karen, completely unaware, or uncaring, of how uncomfortable she was making everyone, kept going. Her voice got louder, and John felt smaller with every word. The bright fluorescent lights above him felt blinding. His vision blurred. The market, once warm and welcoming, now felt suffocating. Karen made sure everyone heard her next words. "This is what we're paying for? This kind of service? He's way too slow. This is unacceptable." The weight of her words pressed down on the entire line. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Others exchanged nervous glances, silently hoping anyone, would step in. John, still trying to finish bagging, finally found the courage to speak. His voice trembled, but it was full of sincerity. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm trying my best." Karen whipped around to face him. She leaned in over the counter, her eyes filled with disdain. "Trying? That's not enough. Not for a job like this. People have schedules to keep, and you're wasting everyone's time." John dropped his gaze, unable to answer. His hands, already shaking, let another bag slip. It hit the floor with a loud thud. Karen laughed, sharp and cruel. "Oh my God, he can't even hold a bag. This is pathetic." A few customers gasped softly. Others exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. A young man in the middle of the line hesitated, then pulled out his phone and hit record. He turned to the woman next to him and whispered, "This is awful, but who's going to stop her?" The woman bit her lip, looking nervous. "She's so aggressive. I don't want to get involved." At the back of the line, the older woman gripped the strap of her purse. She took a small step forward, her eyes filled with sympathy, but she hesitated, unsure if she had the strength to intervene. Karen, seeing that no one was stopping her, smirked. She took their silence as agreement and raised her voice even more. "If you can't do this job, then go do something else." Someone needs to tell you the truth. John's hands were sweaty, his breathing shallow. He tried to focus, to keep going, but the words cut deep. He couldn't look up. He couldn't meet her gaze. Across the store, Jack, the manager, finally noticed something was wrong. He glanced toward John's register, frowning. He started walking toward the commotion, but before he could get there, another customer stopped him to ask for help. The tension in the market was at its peak. And then, someone made a choice that changed everything. Meanwhile, Karen kept going, her voice sharp and unforgiving. She crossed her arms and turned to the other customers, looking for support. Do you all see this? We're all being delayed because of him. It's absurd that someone like this is working in a fast lane. The murmurs in the line grew louder, but no one had the courage to confront her. Each second dragged on endlessly. The air in the market felt thick with discomfort. To the side of the aisle, partially hidden by shelves, a man stood watching. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just observed. His posture was calm, but his expression was unreadable. Dressed simply, he blended in with the crowd, but his eyes were locked onto the unfolding situation. He crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly, as if analyzing every detail. This wasn't the first time he had seen something like this. John, still focused on his work, didn't notice the man. But somehow, he felt a shift in the air. The crushing weight of the moment no longer felt as unbearable. He didn't know why, only that something was about to change. Karen, however, remained oblivious. She was too caught up in her anger to notice anything else. The tension in the market reached a breaking point. The whispers in the line grew louder. People shuffled uncomfortably, some glancing at each other, others pretending to look at their phones. And then, the man stepped forward. He didn't say anything at first, just moved into view, his presence drawing subtle attention. A few customers noticed and exchanged looks. Something about him felt different, like he was waiting for just the right moment to act. John, unaware of the growing shift around him, lifted his gaze for just a second. And then, he met the man's eyes. The look he received wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was calm, steady, strong. It carried something John hadn't felt in a long time. Reassurance. Before John could process it, Karen took a deep breath, ready to unleash another insult. But just as she opened her mouth, a voice cut through the air. That's enough. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Everyone turned, searching for the source. Karen froze, startled for the first time. From across the aisle, the man stepped forward. He didn't rush, but there was something in the way he moved, each step deliberate, steady. The hushed whispers among the customers grew. Who is that? A woman in line asked, squinting to get a better look. Wait, is that him? A younger man muttered, already pulling out his phone. And then, as the man stepped into full view, the recognition spread. It was Clint Eastwood, dressed in a simple shirt and casual pants. He could have been mistaken for any other customer. But here, in this moment, his presence was unmistakable. Karen's face twisted in irritation and disbelief. She huffed, trying to regain control. And you think you can just show up here and tell me how to act? She scoffed, though her voice held a slight nervous edge. Clint stopped a few steps away, his gaze steady. His posture was relaxed, but his presence filled the space. I'm not telling you how to act, he said calmly, his voice carrying both authority and patience. I'm saying that what you're doing right now is wrong. Karen blinked, caught off guard. Wrong? You don't even know what's going on here. I'm just stating the facts. This boy is holding everyone up. Clint let out a small, knowing smile, though his eyes never wavered. The facts? He echoed. The fact is, he's doing his job, and you've chosen to humiliate him for it. There's a big difference between stating facts and using them as a weapon. The murmurs in the crowd grew again, but this time, the focus had shifted. The attention was now on Karen, not John. John, still frozen behind the counter, stared at Clint in disbelief. He didn't understand why this man, this complete stranger, was stepping in, but for the first time since the ordeal started, he felt relief. Someone had finally heard him. Clint turned his attention to John, his expression softening just slightly. What's your name? He asked, his tone calm, steady. John swallowed, still shaken. John, he stammered. Clint nodded. John, you're doing a great job here. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. John's breath hitched. Clint placed a reassuring hand on John's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried something powerful. Strength. Confidence. We all have tough days, Clint said gently, but those don't define who we are. Do you understand that? John, barely able to speak, nodded. And for the first time that day, he felt like he wasn't alone. John nodded slowly, his eyes welling up with tears. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Still, the crushing weight he had felt just moments ago seemed a little lighter. Karen, now visibly uncertain, crossed her arms and let out a short, nervous laugh. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this has nothing to do with you. I just want fast service, and he's clearly not up to the job. Clint turned to her, his expression serious. I'm someone who believes in respect, he said firmly. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. And you've clearly lost sight of that. Karen scoffed, but the confidence in her voice was fading. I have the right to be frustrated. I'm wasting my time here. Clint gave a small nod. You absolutely have the right to feel frustrated, he agreed. What you don't have is the right to take that frustration out on someone who doesn't deserve it, especially someone who's here to help. For the first time, the other customers began to speak up. A woman in the middle of the line raised her voice. He's right. It's not fair to treat the young man like this. Another customer, standing closer to Karen, added, We're all waiting in line. No one else is complaining. What makes you think you're different? Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Some people shook their heads at Karen, while others recorded the moment on their phones. Karen looked around, expecting support. Instead, she saw disapproving gazes. The customers weren't on her side. The energy in the market had completely changed. What started as a moment of humiliation for John had turned into a moment of unity. Clint turned back to John, his voice softer now. Keep being yourself, he said with a small smile. Because who you are is already more than enough. As Clint walked toward the exit, the customers applauded. John watched him go, knowing he would never forget this moment. Karen, realizing she had lost, turned sharply on her heel and stormed out. The click of her heels against the tile echoed as the automatic doors slid open, then shut behind her. For a second, silence filled the market. Then, conversations erupted. Customers whispered about what had just happened, many still looking at the videos they had captured. She had no right to talk to him like that. An older woman muttered to the person next to her. That was incredible. Another customer said, still in awe. I never imagined Clint Eastwood would show up here. Meanwhile, John stood frozen behind the counter, still processing everything. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at them, trying to understand how a moment of embarrassment had turned into something so powerful. Jack, the market manager, finally stepped forward. He placed a hand on John's shoulder. Are you okay, John? He asked gently. John looked at him and, for the first time in a long time, smiled. Yeah, he said, his voice steadier than before. Something had changed in him, a small but unmistakable confidence. Clint's words echoed in his mind. Your worth isn't measured by how quickly you bag groceries. Your worth is who you are. John took a deep breath, as if letting go of a weight he had carried for far too long. As he returned to work, something surprising happened. The customers treated him differently. A woman smiled warmly as she handed him her groceries. You're doing a great job, John. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. An older man in line added, Hey, son, keep it up. You've got more courage than most people out there. These small words, so simple yet sincere, felt like bricks rebuilding his self-esteem, one at a time. The atmosphere in the market had shifted completely. People who had been strangers just minutes ago were now chatting like old friends. A sense of solidarity filled the air. A young woman, still holding up her phone, turned to Jack. That was amazing, she said. Did you see how he handled everything? You should post this on social media. People need to know how incredible John is. Jack smiled and nodded. I agree, he said. But right now, the most important thing is making sure he knows that The market no longer felt like just a place for buying groceries. For the first time, it felt like a community. When his shift finally ended, John walked to the locker room, his steps slow and thoughtful. He sat down on the wooden bench, staring at his uniform. For so long, he had felt invisible, like people only noticed his mistakes or the things that made him different. But today was different. Today, people had seen him, not just as a worker, not as someone too slow or not good enough. They had seen him, and for the first time in his life, he believed that he mattered. He thought back to that morning, when his mother had told him how important he was to their family. Now, for the first time, he was beginning to believe it himself. Meanwhile, outside the market, Clint Eastwood walked calmly to his parked car. He wasn't looking for applause or recognition. For him, this was just another day of doing what was right. Before getting into his car, he turned back toward the market one last time. He smiled, because he knew this moment wasn't about him. It was about John, and how a single act of kindness could change the course of a day, perhaps even a life. The next day, the impact of the moment spread far beyond the market. Videos of Clint defending John went viral. Millions of people shared them across social media. Hashtags like #RespectForJohn and #KindnessMatters trended worldwide. People who had been there shared their stories, inspiring others to think about how small actions could make a big difference. John, who had once been afraid of being noticed, had become a symbol of resilience and strength. And as the narrator closes the story, one simple truth remains. Every day, we have the choice to be kind. We can lift others up instead of tearing them down. Even the smallest action, a kind word, a moment of understanding, can change a person's life. And in the end, it's up to us to create a world where respect and empathy are the norm, not the exception. The next morning, as John walked to work, something felt different. He no longer carried the weight of cruel words or self-doubt. Instead, he carried something else. The words of encouragement, the support, the belief that he mattered. And when he entered the market, he was met with warm smiles from customers in the checkout line. "Good morning, John," someone called. "Glad to see you today," another said. John smiled back, because he knew he would never feel alone again.